and welcome to the Summit QCTO Insider. Today, we're diving into some interesting updates from the Quality Council for Trade and Occupations, that is QCTO in short. We will discuss new procedures and how they actually influence us. Furthermore, we will touch on the latest QCTO qualifications and an update on extended legacy qualifications list. Today, I am joined by Matt Lambert from Reach Summit and Andrea Kellett from Thrive to continue the discussion and updates for QCTO. Welcome, Matt and Andrea.
Hi, Refilwe.
Hi, Refilwe. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. To get started, Matt, could you give us an overview of the current procedures for the skills development providers and our clients within the QCTA framework?
Yeah, so I'm just working on the skills development provider or the SDP side of things. So very boring. I think we've gone through it a few times. So I'm going to focus on the high level stages. And obviously there's guidelines and policies on the website, the QCTO website, in terms of exactly what you need, but maybe some key call outs from the sort of three key segments that were highlighted in the updated Road to Success from an accreditation guideline perspective in October 2024. So not necessarily hot off the press, but maybe not everyone, we know October, November, kind of winds down. So maybe not everyone took a great look through the documentation. But as we know, sort of three key phases, one being your starting point is your online application, obviously submitting all the key statutory information, your program delivery readiness. But, some of the interesting call outs that have been sort of highlighted or earmarked in the Road to Success document is that even if you are submitting for a blended or online application, that there is a requirement that a proof of address is submitted from an SDP perspective, and that needs to marry your CRP document or CRPC documentation as well. And also very interesting or kind of highlight is that cannot have two or more skills development providers registered at one physical training center site. And then some of the other sort of key call outs in that sort of area is if, for example, you don't have a signed MOU in place from a workplace perspective, you have the ability at that point in time to submit a letter of intent. Essentially, that letter of intent would have to highlight that once accreditation is granted, that the MOU would be entered into with that prospective workplace partner. So that's essentially some key call outs there. Obviously, step 2 is the desktop evaluation. So just obviously from that perspective is, from an evaluation side of things, if there are shortfalls, you would have the opportunity to highlight, or you would be highlighted in terms of what those shortfalls are. You then can resub or add or submit documentation to cover those gaps. And then step 3 would be the site visit. Just so we all clear and aware that site visit can actually be either in person or online. Some sort of key call outs there as well, once again, is ensuring that the facilitator of the particular program is present for the site visit. And then also just in terms of the site visit, some other key call outs is you have the ability to cancel the site visit if there needs to be, or you need to, for whatever reason, cancel it. It needs to be done 7 working days prior to the confirmed appointment. A key thing is if you don't cancel and you're not prepared for whatever reason for the visit and the visit goes ahead, there is obviously an opportunity for your application to then be denied, and essentially you would have to resubmit and start the process again. So very high level key overview of the sort of 3 steps and some key call outs. Thanks, Refilwe.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Matt, for those 3 steps. Very important. Thanks again. Andrea, we've noticed a few procedures that came into play for skills development providers, that is your SDPs, and their clients. Could you please elaborate on what these new procedures are and what their implications are for service delivery?
Sure, Refilwe. Well, one of the hot topics at the moment is certainly the conversation around whether when and whether the QCTO will start charging SDPs for application. This was originally brought to the public's attention. It's actually been past their board some 5 or so years ago, so they have always had the right to do this. I myself went to go and dig in the gazettes and things, and found that it is indeed true. They are entitled to charge us for application to cover costs. This is not that unfamiliar. We do see it with CHE and with professional bodies as well, so it's perhaps not that surprising. I think what caught SDPs off guard a little bit was the amounts. It was 6,000 Rand for your first application, including one qualification, with an additional 1,300 per additional programs, up to a maximum of 5, and then you start the application process again. So I was at the consultation that QCTO held about a month or so ago, and there was more than 1,000 people there on that Teams meeting. Lots of people with lots of things to say and lots of questions about exactly when it would be implemented, and so quite a lot of pushback, especially from the small SDPs around the amount. I think it's safe to say that no conclusions were drawn from that, and in fact we were looking forward to more feedback this morning from 9 till 11, which was then postponed this morning, so we don't have any follow-up on that. I think it's safe to say, my opinion is that there probably will be a charge coming through. We'll probably see that during the course of this year. The suggestion was it would be from the new financial year, which is the 1st of April, but today's notification of postponement said that the new date would be announced only beyond once they've had another consultation. So I think it's safe to say that we don't know anything for sure about this, but I wouldn't be surprised if we saw that a little later in the year.
Thank you very much. That is very insightful. And adding to that, what would you recommend stakeholders to keep in mind when engaging with these new changes?
For me, an SDP applying for accreditation should always start with a really solid business idea, with a sustainable idea of what to apply for, what it will be at the end of the day, who their competition are, what they will charge, so that this business can be sustainable beyond the achievements of accreditation. For me, it's not just about getting accredited and getting your foot in the door. It's also about, what is this business going to be beyond that? And that's going to take some investment. That's going to take some investment in your human resources, your training materials, potentially your online systems, your digitization of content, or physical resources, and these kinds of things. And so when you're making an investment like that, including the application fee, again, we just need to be mindful that we're on the right track. And if we're in this for the long haul, I'm not too concerned with the application fees. If we're in here, if we're in this for 5 or 10 years for sustainable business, then I don't think that the initial application fees should be prohibitive in terms of that. But yeah, my advice always is have a good solid look at your plan, and not just be too focused on, getting through the compliance and getting through the site visit, but actually what is this going to give us later? How long is our program? How do we charge it? How are we going to deliver it? And who is our market? Yeah.
Oh, thank you very much for that, Andrea. Matt, if we look at the changes that is actually being implemented with QCTO, what advice would you give them to better prepare the future? To better prepare for the future, our clients.
So I think, I'd absolutely agree with what Andrew was saying in terms of the starting point is ensuring that you've got a strong plan and business case in terms of which programs you want to be accredited for and why. And I think the application fee, and I can also understand the pushback and the kickback perhaps from some providers, but I think what the application fee could do is force people to be a little bit more mindful on how and what they apply for. Because what we have seen is this sort of blanket-based approach of just flooding the system to apply and get your, as Andrew pointed out, get your foot in the door, get into the system. And, the challenge with that is that puts a lot of constraints. When I say constraints, the sheer volume and the ability for the QCTO to process that sheer volume has definitely, from what we've seen in our personal experience, and understandably so, led to a backlog in terms of, you know, the accreditation process coming through in the defined 90 days as highlighted in the road to success. So I think it's a way to ensure that there's skin in the game, for lack of a better way to put it, from a skills development provider perspective. How that could benefit our clients, their clients, I think is, you know, if it does have that particular approach of ensuring that people are mindful, thoughtful, and the system isn't flooded, we could hopefully see a quicker time frame in respect of the accreditation process, or at least, you know, within the defined 90 days as highlighted in the road to success, which would be great, I think, for everyone, because I think some of the constraints in terms of different organizations participating in QCTO programs is that slight delay from an accreditation perspective. And like I said, hopefully by putting a filtering mechanism on skills development providers, it will ensure that there's thought behind it, there's a business case, there's a plan really that has been thought through well. That puts hopefully less constraint and restraint on the system. We can get those, you know, the cycle going in the sort of defined time period, means more people can then in a quicker period participate in QCTO programs, whether it be proof of concepts, whatever the case may be from a client perspective. Clients then get used to and understand the QCTO process, which will eventually assist them in the long run if we look at where it seems to be going. So that's kind of a bit of a long answer, but kind of what I've thought through and I'm hoping would be achieved, because I agree with Andrea. I do believe that there will be a fee. What that fee is, obviously we've got some numbers now. Whether that changes or not, it's a bit uncertain at this point in time, but I definitely agree with her in the context that there will be a fee. I definitely believe that to be true.
All right. Thank you very much, Matt. I actually took plans and processes there. Thank you for that. All right. Moving on. Andrea, some SETAs have recently announced the extension of certain legacy qualifications. Could you highlight 3 positives and maybe 3 negatives of these extensions for our clients?
Yeah, interesting times where we have these unit standard-based legacy SETA programs extended. I think certainly from a positive point of view, it allows this new QCTO, this relatively new QCTO system, a little bit more time to have the occupational qualifications and the skills programs that we're looking for. There's no doubt in my mind, I've been calling it the Bermuda Triangle for the longest time, for many years, that there's this big gap between what we had in the legacy system and what we're seeking in the QCTO system, what's fit for purpose, what clients are looking for. And certainly this extension softens that a little bit. I really do believe there were quite a lot of legacy qualifications left off that initial list, which again just left a lot of people in a lot of limbo. And at the end of the day, it's the learners that suffer the most. So I'm pleased to see that there's another chance now to have those extended and for us to have a little bit more time. I think it also helps providers. Providers are rough times through COVID and now through all these QCTO changes. And so I do think it also helps providers. So we can all slip back into comfy old slippers and, you know, do these older programs and, you know, POEs and things, unit standards and things that we're so used to. And then, you know, it does provide a little bit of relief, I think. I think it also helps companies and corporates. You know, there's a lot of pressure on BEE to make sure you get your points, and companies that have budgets to spend on SDPs that could do with the money for learners that could do with an education, like this is a good thing. And so the system is set up like that. And where there were many gaps, I had many clients that just didn't have anywhere to put their money, and often sought international programs and international engagements in order to ensure that they got their BE points. But that is not good for South African business and for all of us on the ground. So yeah, I'm delighted to see there's a little bit more movement on that. From a downside point of view, I think I've seen recently some of the legacy qualifications that in my mind have indeed already moved across to the QCTO, now recently been extended. And there must be reasons for that I'm not aware of, because I'm not sure why we would go backwards if we could go forwards with the new QCTO qualifications. For sure, there are some challenges on the lack of ISIS, for example. That might be one of the reasons, but I certainly feel like we are, maybe not focusing on exactly the right qualifications, potentially maybe looking at ones that have already moved across. And I don't think that that's a great idea. And of course, all the providers, many I speak to myself, who are not interested in moving to QCTO or afraid of the change or don't want to make the investment. And so it kind of makes their lives a little easier that they can continue as is with the legacy qualifications too. Yeah, I think that's pretty much the worst of it. But yeah, looking forward to the shift to QCTO as always.
Thank you very much. As they would say, change is tough, but change is necessary. All right. If we move, Matt, if we move from just adding on to what Andrea said, what would you say these changes mean for the businesses at large?
Well, I think maybe just to sort of double click and kind of extend exactly what Andrea was saying is that I think from a business perspective, it's something that is useful, very useful for them in terms of many of these extensions. As we said, change is sometimes very difficult. I think there are still, importantly, some questions that it seems like the verification analysts from a BBBEE perspective aren't in agreement with consistently across the board there, and in terms of, let's say, the new QCTO programs, where on the learning program matrix some of these sit, which has an effect on the skills development scorecard. So because of that, it has made businesses a bit wary in relation to, exactly as Andrea highlighted, where to put their money, because it's very important for the organization to ensure that they are developing skilled individuals as well as complying with what they need to comply with. And for many of them, it is a legislative requirement in terms of ensure that they are able to trade or retain licenses, etc. So it's no small thing, and something not to be flippant about. So what this does do, I think, from a business and client perspective, is give a little bit of breathing space, exactly what Andrea highlighted. And if I putting myself in their shoes, obviously taking hold of this breathing space and possibly doing the combination of hedging. Diversification is a key for a great investment strategy, and it's a key for most things in life. So, from my perspective, I'd be definitely, if there are still some concerns in respect of how it impacts the overall business from a variety of elements, is to look at something that we're comfortable with in the legacy qualification, but to blend that with proof of concepts with the QCTO programs, and not necessarily just, one, i.e. in a certain area on one program. Doesn't always give you a strong feel. If you're depending on the size of the organization, if you've got a variety of different departments, it may be useful across a range of those, particularly operational departments, because that's where it has sort of the biggest impact in many businesses, not so much at support offices or support services, but direct operational, i.e. if you're a retailer, store floors, your DCs, etc. You've really got to test and really run these variety of proof of concepts so that you as an organization can be comfortable with minimizing your risk in relation to what you need to achieve in this next year or the year after. So really, for me, I would be using it as a great opportunity to sort of combine the two, and maybe depending on what volume you would like to, but maybe balance it in according to what you're used to, and have arranged, like I said, highlighting POCs of the QCTO program. At least then, the unknown, the uncertainty, which I think is where a lot of people are not willing to invest in, you can get through that. And also and evolve and understand, because yes, the QCTO is evolving as we go, as well in many other aspects. But if you're doing these proof of concepts, there's no harm in evolving with them at a smaller scale, a lot less risk, and an opportunity to give more attention to the particular learners through this initial kind of learning period, excuse the pun, for both the individuals and learners, as well as the organization and those individuals supporting those learners from the organizational client perspective. So I think, looking at it from that perspective, it gives a real great opportunity to create that diversification element and sort of dip your toe in the water with a lot less or even minimal risk from that perspective.
Oh, thank you very much. I couldn't agree with you more.
Mhm.
All right. We have time for one last question. Andrea, I know that we've touched a little bit on the previous question about the list of new qualifications. What can you forecast for the future of QCTO qualifications, given the fact that these list of qualifications currently actually growing?
Yeah, it's fantastic, especially if the tech space comes to mind, where we see very different and interesting qualifications that we never had before in such a fast-moving environment. So I think it's a really nice opportunity for these working groups to realign to the scarce and critical skills in a particular industry, to really get to grips with what are the scarce job titles, we call them the OFO codes, where are the scarcities in a particular sector, and how can we address that? What are the lessons that we've learned in the legacy qualifications? What has worked for us and what hasn't worked for us, and gives us a chance to map not only to South African scarce and critical skills, but also to look internationally and to just bring us forward a little bit. Some of those tech unit standards talk about fax machines and floppy disks, and so really, in its most exciting format, these working groups really do give us the opportunity to bring everything forward and to refine and to ensure that we have learners that are really ready for the workplace, not just having been through a learning experience, but very practical, very workplace based, nice competencies in some of them. And for that, I remain the eternal optimist when it comes to these things. I think on the more downside, it's been a slower process than any of us anticipated. I think the registration of the new qualifications on the website, either because it got stuck or some tech problem or something, is frustrating to a lot of providers waiting for these programs to come through at the other side. But I trust over time, as they get reviewed and as they, certainly in 5 or 10 years, I think it's going to look like an amazing system. And for that, I'm quite excited. Yeah, I was originally a lot more hopeful about the quality assurance actually of SDPs, that they would be given, and to a large extent, we are given a lot more freedom to manage our own quality, like the universities do and that kind of thing. And certainly we see that in the no more registered assessors and moderators anymore, for us as providers to be able to manage that and to manage our own human resources in our own way without having this external listing process, which I also think for the good-hearted and for the high-quality SDPs, like Matt's fine establishment, of course, is really exciting and really allows you to shine, allows you to show your quality mechanisms in place and to therefore be ahead of the pack, and that I think is good for business all round.
No, absolutely, I agree with you, Andrea. I mean, it's a very interesting concept, because within our group, we run private higher education institutions, and if you look at the quality assurance from that perspective, is essentially embodied and left to the institution itself, with institutional audits occurring effectively every 5 years, where everything's reviewed, etc. But if you look at that and you look at the fact that those institutions are providing higher education qualifications, which are also extremely critical, also as critical as our vocational qualifications. But in that sector or that sect, the quality assurance is allowed to be run by the institution, versus the quality assurance from a provider, let's say a vocational education provider. There's a difference, which is interesting. I'm sure there's reasons and rationale for it historically, but it is interesting that you've got these sort of two different approaches across effectively two different types of education, for lack of a better way to put it. So yeah, I am very much in favor of, at least as you've highlighted, there has been a slight shift in that direction, even to the degree of the statement of results, which I think is a good move. I think just from a from a volume of work and constraint on historically on the sector education training authorities just to obtain those statements of results were incredibly difficult. I would love, although that won't happen, although to my suggestions, I would love for the skills development providers to be able to actually issue certification as well within a correct and strong quality assurance framework, of course. But just as higher education institutions are allowed to, private higher education institutions, as well as obviously public. So, maybe one day we get there. But because, as we know, that's always been a challenge historically, is learner certification and obtaining those, obtaining those in the requisite time frame. But we'll take it one step at a time. Let's eat the elephant one bite at a time and not throw too much out there. Otherwise, it'll take maybe a little bit longer. So, but yeah, I just wanted to add an echo to what you highlighted.
All right. Thank you very much, Matt and Andrea. We've seen these changes. They represent a significant shift in the regulatory landscape for vocational education in South Africa. This is aiming to improve, obviously, the overall quality and sustainability of skills development programs. Let us know what your thoughts and comments are below. Again, thank you, Matt and Andrea, for clarifying these hot topics within the QCTO. And thank you again to our listeners for listening today on the QCTO Summit Insider. Thank you very much.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you, Andrea.
Sure. Thanks, Matt.
Mm-hmm.